So hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole and today I am going to be talking about book projects and reading multiple books at the same time and how everyone can bring their book projects and book reading to the next level. I mean, that sounds like super exciting, but I don't know, maybe you'll disagree with me, but I think it's next level reading and I love it. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about syntopical reading or comparative reading, and particularly in the field of comparative lit. So let's go ahead and get into it, and I'll start by explaining in more detail what I'm talking about. So the basic idea I'm going with here is why read one book when you can read two, and why not have them be related to one another? This is kind of like the if you give a mouse a cookie, but for book lovers. Basically, if you give me a book, I'm going to want to read that book and probably another book that's related to it and three more before I get back to this one and consider them all together. That is the basic gist of syntopical reading and comparative reading, and if you watch my channel, you see me do it all the time. So here's a slightly more defined definition of syntopical or comparative reading. Thank you, Google. Syntopical or comparative reading is when you're reading multiple books on the same subject at the same time to gain a more comprehensive understanding of the topic. So why would you want to do this? Why would you want to read multiple books? And they don't literally have to be at the same time. You could be reading the books just in close conjunction to one another. But yeah, the question is why? Well, for one, I do agree in my experience that it will broaden and deepen your knowledge on a particular subject area or theme, or even just broaden your experience of reading these two books or more together. The other reason to do it is it's fun. It's really fascinating, the insights and just the excitement and the revelations that you get from reading two books that have points of heavy comparison or heavy contrast. The reason you might want to do this is because you are probably going to do it anyway. And when you start to see some of the examples I give of books that you could read syntopically, you'll start to realize that you're also probably already doing this. For example, if you are big into BookTube and you love watching those videos that are like, oh, if you liked this book, read that book, they're actually encouraging you to comparatively read or to syntopically read. So the only difference in what I'm talking about and what you're probably doing when you read another book that's like a book you just read is that I'm just asking you to slow down and maybe be aware of what you're doing. Because if you're aware and a bit more intentional in this process, you might even get more enjoyment out of the book than you would have otherwise. Or at the very least, you might have more to say about the books. So, of course, the next question would then be, how do I do this? And it's pretty straightforward. I'm not trying to present to you, a course on literature here, but really just how to engage more in this as a reader and be a bit more intentional in your casual reading, I guess. So I would say that the first step is you need to pick at least two books to compare. And this can be two books that you find are just similar in terms of genre, or you could even take it to the next level and find books that are similar in any of the following ways. Similar themes, tones, language, points of view or characters, settings, or methods of plotting or structure in the book. And these are all things that will help you sort of go deeper and connect more with each of the works, as well as gain a broader understanding of a particular subject area and maybe even the writer's purpose. So to give you some concrete examples of what that might look like, I have a stack of books here with me. The first book that I have here is The Gossamer Years. This is part of my Tale of Genji project that I'm doing, and the reason that I would pair this with The Tale of Genji is because they have similar settings as well as potentially themes and characters in them. The Tale of Genji is set in 10th century Japanese court life, and this book, Gossamer Years, tells the story from a female courtier's point of view. The Tale of Genji, however, tells a similar story from a male's point of view. So you can already see where some of the comparisons and contrasts would come in. One of the things that happened to me after reading The Tale of Genji was I thought, gosh, Genji's not exactly the best guy, to say the least, and he does a lot of horrible things to women in the book, and I really wanted to know what all of this life would be like for a woman. This is actually a work of nonfiction that was written by a female courtier. And so there you go. There is a couple of points of things to compare. Another book that I read earlier this year is William Styron's The Confessions of Nat Turner, and that started yet another book project for me where I wanted to, again, compare the same character as viewed through someone else's lens. And for that, I am reading In the Matter of Nat Turner, A Speculative History. This is, again, a nonfiction work that I will be comparing with the fiction work that I read. That said, I also think it's fun to compare books that were written in the same setting. So years ago, I read Gone with the Wind, and I have all sorts of thoughts about that book. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure that I will read it again for this book project, but for part of the syntopical reading, I will be reading Jubilee by Margaret Walker, which is the story of an African-American woman, and it is set in the same time and the same place in Georgia that Gone with the Wind was set. So I have the feeling this will be ripe with comparisons to make, but it may require me to read Gone with the Wind yet again. I don't know if I can do that. More recently, I was reading And Ladies of the Club, and I DNF'd this book because I just could not stand the characters. But in the midst of reading this book, I did discover that the author wrote this book as an antidote to Sinclair Lewis's Main Street. And so, of course, I can't help but now want to pick up Main Street and read that so I can compare these two works and see if this really was the antidote to what he wrote. I'm very doubtful that it was. If you've been following my channel for a while, you know that one of my ongoing book projects is the book Drood by Dan Simmons, and this book really encourages you to read comparatively because he mentions other books within this book that not only does he spoil the books if you haven't read, but it's clear that he's so heavily relying on those works in the writing and telling the story within here that it's almost impossible to not want to read those other books. And those other books would include most particularly Our Mutual Friend, The Mystery of Edwin Drood, as well as Bleak House. All works by Charles Dickens, who is a main character in this book. So this is a work where I will be comparing not only characters, but even the portrayal of the author and his works and this author's interpretation of that. So many things to consider. So beyond just pairing the two books together, you might be asking, well, what do I do after that? What's the point? Well, the point is to focus and reflect on the things that you are noticing as you read. So some of the points that you may want to focus on or reflect on as you read these two works would be the following. The conflicts in the story, especially the main conflicts in the story. Universal themes that are mentioned, the message of the story overall, characterization, the message that the book is making about society, as well as symbols and any other literary element that you find of interest. Once you have read both the works and you have focused on those elements and reflected on the similarities and differences there, you may also want to take the time to reflect on the following question. How was this topic treated in both of the works? What were the similarities? Why were there differences? And what was included or missing in each of the books? Finally, come to some conclusions about the works that you have made. And this would include something simple as rating the books. But do notice, if you have read the books instead of simultaneously, but back to back, does the reading of one book end up changing your rating of the other book? And sometimes I find frequently for me, this will be the case, is that I can't help but rate them in relation to one another. It's also good to consider after reading multiple works like this, if you would continue to read similar works or other books that are like this. It is a really helpful way to identify the type of reading that you might enjoy. It also may help you identify whether or not you would want to read more by an author. So you may find that maybe the two books varied greatly in their handling of a subject, and so much so that you now prefer one author's writing over the other. And finally, this type of reading will also tend to help you make better recommendations about the book. So that's basically it. It's pretty straightforward. Find two books that have some similarities. I will say it does tend to require you to know a little bit about each book, at least enough to know that they would have points of comparison or contrast, and then read them. Reflect on some of the questions maybe, or themes or topics that I mentioned in this video, and see if that broadens your knowledge on a certain area. If you're interested in giving this a try, I'm going to invite you to do so with me. So for the month of August and September, I will be comparatively reading two books. And those books are The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain and James by Percival Everett. I do have a copy of James here. And so these two books are books that work very well in comparing them and reading them syntopically. They feature the same characters, Huck Finn as well as James. However, from what I've heard, they're very different stories, which is often the case when you switch protagonists and points of view. So I am very interested in rereading The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and then also seeing what Percival Everett did with this story, where he may have left things the same, where he may have changed things, and why, what he included, what he excluded, and what reading these books together tells me about the message that he is trying to communicate in writing this book. While you don't have to read these two books together to get a lot out of either of them, I just think that reading them together will just give me such a deeper understanding of this book in particular that I can't wait to do it. So again, I will be reading those in August and September. You can join me in discussing these books and what you're learning and seeing on Discord. I will be sure to, in my Discord channel for this, pin to the top of the page, things to look for and reflect on and the questions that I mentioned in this video. You can read these two books at your own pace at any time. You may have already read these two books and you're still welcome to come and join the discussion on Discord, because you may find that maybe you didn't think about these two books in this particular manner while reading them. And so you may have more to discuss now as you think about it. But yeah, James has been all over the place. And so it's definitely become a book project for me and hopefully for you and for everyone. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a little outside of what I normally do, but I love comparative lit. I love syntopical reading, and I just wanted to share more about it with everybody because yeah, book projects are for everyone.